All right. First of all, I'm really excited because I now have a microphone. I did actually realize I purchased a microphone, so this is my second microphone and I've had one all along, but it's fine. So, why is it important to know how to get the best intuitive reading that you can? You are likely putting time, money, energy into receiving an intuitive reading. And also, they can be really important. They can be really, resonating, validating. Um, they can be really insightful and give you a lot of information and knowledge. They can provide connection for you. They can, align you to your life purpose. So I feel like there's unlimited amounts of positives that can come out of it. And, this is really for probably someone who is newer to intuitive readings, but I also feel like even if you've had a few, this could just be like a different, interesting perspective. And just to clarify, these are just my tips. Obviously, you are entitled to go into an intuitive reading however you want, and maybe there are different things which work for you. But this is just my perspective, and hopefully this can help. Probably the first thing we should talk about is finding the right reader for you. This can be a little bit challenging unless you have already found a reader that you jive with. In terms of actually finding them, I put myself on my website, which is searchable, even though I don't think anyone has come from my search results, but I'm also on Etsy, and I know that a lot of people can be found on Yelp or just simply a Google search. I think what's good about this new kind of like post-COVID era is that a lot of people are doing digital readings. I actually don't do any in-person readings, so I think that it's easier to find people who are more matched to you. And everybody, has their own sort of specialty, even if that specialty is just their perception value and the way that they, perceive the world and digest information and, express it onto you. So again, since some people specialize in things, you'll likely want to find a reader that's aligned to whatever your goals are, whatever you are looking to kind of receive. Some people specialize in more mediumship or love, maybe even life purpose. Some people do more kind of like health and body healing and Reiki. I feel like there's literally an unlimited amount of modalities. If you're not sure what you're looking for, it can be a little bit more challenging. Obviously, you would search for an intuitive, similar to how you would search for anything. So, based on reviews. I also feel like if you kind of like see a picture of your intuitive reader, or you kind of like visit their website or their social media or whatever, and you just get a good feeling about them and you feel like you resonate with what they're saying, that's like a really good clue that you'll likely have a very good reading with them. I honestly feel like some of the best readers just have people that they don't jive with, and I'm not really entirely sure why, to be honest with you. I think everybody is just super different, and everybody is not everybody's taste. So you found the right reader, and now it's time to prep for your reading. Definitely choose whatever type of minute amount or type or style of reading is most aligned to you. I know that some people like to do more kind of like Zoom or in-person readings. Other people are okay with more receiving digital PDFs of their reading. So it just kind of depends if you are kind of wanting to have more of a conversation with somebody or just receive the information and like you're totally good with that. Typically, personally, I like about a 45-minute timeline. That's what I offer for the reader. It just allows for a little bit of buffer time. And sometimes I feel like 30 minutes is a little bit too short. So I think that the 45 kind of like encompasses it. But I know that people offer lots of different, times for their readings, some as short as 15 minutes. I don't think I've seen anybody offer anything longer than an hour, but I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure it's possible. Upon preparing for your reading, probably something that not a lot of people talk about is the kind of like days or hours leading up to it. As a reader, there's this thing that I like to call energy resolving itself, which is essentially setting an intention and realizing that the answer may not be like available to me at like this precise moment in time. Sometimes energy just needs to quite literally evolve itself or resolve itself, and there just needs to be a little bit more time for energy to kind of like tie up its loose ends. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but if we think about it, all energy is alive, and at the same time, since kind of like the client or you as the reader need to have access to this energy in some way, shape, or form, and sometimes there's guidelines or boundaries around it, sometimes these kind of walls need to lift in order for the information to become more relevant. But going back to timing, if you want a specific answer, but you yourself or other people or other things, places, beings, whatever, involved in this situation haven't made up their mind yet, more time needs to resolve itself, right? Because we, at the end of the day, have free will, and there needs to be a little bit more of, concrete evidence, I guess, available in order to deliver like more of an accurate message. So what I would do is, knowing that you're going into a reading, I would likely set the intention that you just kind of want to remain as open as possible, or really as open as you feel comfortable with. You want energy to sort of resolve itself. You want to be, inspired with the questions that you're supposed to ask your reader. Really anything and everything to help you kind of out in this reading. And I think it can be really personal to each person. So whatever you're looking to kind of know about or talk about, just kind of set that intention beforehand. So then when you get to the reading, in terms of what you kind of want to be prepared with, I would definitely recommend being in kind of like a quiet, safe spot. Hopefully it's a little bit distraction free. I know it's not always possible. I would also recommend having a pen and paper. I think that digital notes are definitely okay, but there's something about like pen and paper that feels more intention setty or manifesty in my opinion. So I guess if you technically don't resonate with what the reader is talking about, maybe that's not the best idea. But anything, I would have to assume that you're writing down things which feel important or validated for you. So I think it's okay. And you also definitely want to be prepared with questions. It can be really challenging to go into a reading and start to get the ball rolling and, become really distracted from what your original intention was. And I actually like it too, because what I do is I write down all of the questions that my client has so that it's kind of like in front of me, and then I'll just intuitively bounce around to whatever I feel like is the best kind of like topic to talk about at that moment. Because I do oddly feel that order it's kind of secretly important, because starting with one thing, it may ultimately give you an answer that's like relevant for a lot of other things. So it's kind of like, yeah, there's like multiple ways that you can kind of build a house, I guess, but there's also like much more of a strategic way to do it, which is a little bit more efficient, a little bit more time saving. And in the case of you delivering a reading, it can just kind of be less confusing, right? Like, obviously this is working with abstract energy, so a house metaphor or building a house is not necessarily entirely relevant, but if you're just kind of stacking on a lot of information, it can be really easy to interpret it in a way that's kind of like over inundating or almost like contradicting itself essentially. But the good news is that a lot of times, myself at least, I'm able to understand overarching concepts and themes, and they kind of play out in different areas and aspects of life. So, in that way, maybe it's a little bit more simple. But anyway, every intuitive has their own way of doing it. So I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to conduct yourself in an intuitive reading. You obviously don't want to give like every kind of ounce of information, because, not from a trying to trap an intuitive to make sure that they are, providing all the information without you kind of setting them up and making sure that they are legitimate or whatever. Providing a lot of information can ultimately be a little bit distracting for someone who's intuitive. I think that a good method is like a volleyball kind of method, where like the reader kind of puts out a piece of information and the client can say either like yes or no, or like, oh yeah, that's like for this. And I think like an open dialogue going back and forth, typically with the reader providing more of the information, that is what I personally like. I know that every reader is like a little bit different, but I feel like it's, to me, it's very awkward, honestly, when clients don't say anything at all, because I don't really know or understand, not necessarily if it resonates partially, but also I just don't know how they're feeling, like overall. And that can be like really challenging to work with, because obviously like in any sort of service that you provide someone, it's good to kind of like check in, and having a conversation back and forth is an easy way to kind of know and understand how someone is feeling. So I would say it's good to be like an active participant. You don't have to like share anything and everything, but I feel like it's good to be involved in one way, shape, or form. And definitely don't like lie unless like you really don't want them to say something and you're like already kind of barreling into it. Like I feel like there would be like almost practically no instance where you would want to lie, because it's just kind of like counterintuitive to you receiving this service and the point. And it can just be like really confusing, because that will just like immediately cut off a thread of information if that's the case. And you won't be able to get the answer that you're looking for, because the reader will just like assume something is wrong or it's not relevant, and they'll just likely cut it off completely, honestly. It's interesting because adversely, I feel like I've also had clients that like really, really love to talk. And I kind of like almost feel bad in those instances, because I'm not even getting as much, intuitive information out of it. But I really don't stress about it, because I think, like I said, every person is different and every person chooses to do with it what they want. So I don't really feel like there's a wrong answer here, to be honest. So I kind of want to talk about coming into a reading with questions. You never have to come into a reading with questions, but I find that like 95% of the time, when people don't come in with questions, they become inspired like very quickly throughout the reading, or they kind of realize that there actually was something that they wanted to ask about, or whatever, any sort of, combination of events happens. And then we get to the end of the reading and they're like, oh my gosh, like I actually have a bunch of questions that need to be answered. And I feel like the time likely could have been used more productively to answer what they really wanted to know. However, I feel like there's a reason for everything. I don't really fault people for doing this. I do this myself. But if you feel like, it's not appropriate to ask questions, I would discourage you from thinking that. And if also, it depends on the reader in particular, but feel free to kind of like reach out and ask questions. This is also like its own separate kind of message that, you don't have to feel super stressed about choosing the right person if you have questions or things which are unknown. I feel like people are likely more open than not to answering your questions. So feel free to do that. So let's talk about what is a good and a bad question, even though there's really no such thing as like a bad question. But I will explain why I perceive some questions to be good or bad. I find that good questions in general are specific yet open-minded. And by that, I mean, it's good to provide context for like whatever your question is. So like specific as in, this has to do with me, this has to do with this particular family member, this particular friend. And I would like to know this question, which is likely more of a yes or no question. I feel like yes and no can be very black and white, which is kind of like what I'll explain in a second, how I feel bad questions are. And it's usually out of a place of love, right? Like, so say for example, we're talking about a family member. What can I do to kind of like help my relationship with this family member? Or like, how can I kind of like have success in my career? How can I kind of like make my relationship better? And I really like these questions because one, it puts you kind of like more so in the driver's seat rather than a predicted outcome, because what I am really liking about intuitives and intuitive readings now is that it's a lot less about predictive outcomes than it was in the past. And I completely understand the want and need for a predictive outcome, but I feel that energy has changed so much in the way that we are genuinely the manifestors of our own destiny, and we have the opportunity and ability to change like essentially whatever we want in the future. And to kind of ask, will this certain thing happen to me in the next 6 months or the next year? Since myself and others can read energy, we can definitely like provide you, and I guess this is really more so me, I don't want to talk for other people. I can definitely provide you with a good guess because energy just like repeats itself. So it's easy to like deduce and understand patterns, especially like in context with other things going on, and also kind of like laddering it up to present moment and life purpose. So like there's definitely like an energetic math equation that could be used, but it's never a guarantee at the end of the day, because not only do you have free will, but the universe has free will. Anybody and everybody that you're involved with has free will. So there's just really, no way to tell, honestly. Like, miracles happen, magic happens, like, you can change your life literally at any moment. So, like, yeah, it's a good guess, but nothing is ever 100% sure. So when you frame questions in that kind of way, it almost sets you up for being disappointed or frustrated if you really want an outcome and your energy isn't really like moving in that direction. Which is why, again, reframing it to be like, okay, am I going to get this job in 6 months? It can more so be like, what can I do to like get this job in the next few months? I feel like that is more of a productive and helpful question, because then as an intuitive, I can provide you with like a lot more context than you may be aware of. Because if you're simply like, am I going to get this job in the next 6 months? And I say no, that could hypothetically be the end of the question line. And that's really unhelpful, in my opinion. And it only really satisfies the need and want to know a specific answer in like 1 second. But it doesn't really, it's kind of like, teach a man to fish type of thing, right? Like, it's, if I just provide you this one answer, you're going to be satisfied with it for like 1 second. And again, it's like, there's no 100% guarantee regardless. But if, someone who's intuitive can help set you up in a, really good way, I feel like that has value. And maybe other people and maybe other intuitive people don't agree with that. And I think that's totally fine, because it's not that it's right or wrong, because there's definitely been times and points and places in my life where I've really wanted a black and white answer. I wouldn't say that like personally I was at my best at those times, but there's certainly a market for it and a need for it. So if you're someone who wants that, or an intuitive that provides that, that's great. I just don't personally like agree with like extreme predictive methods, because I just don't feel like that's the way that energy is moving. I know it sounds like I'm backtracking on it, but I'm really not. Everybody is so different, so I respect that. I also want to say that I don't really get negative questions a lot, but like, you definitely want to avoid things which are not out of a place of love. In other words, like, is this person like doing something bad? Like, I don't know. I honestly don't even know, because now I feel like I'm broaching like spiritual law, which is also like spying and like getting information out of other people, like through an intuitive, which like, again, I don't really get very much of, but I think there's pretty clear, at least for me, ethics and boundaries in terms of questions. Like, there's certain things that I just won't answer, particularly if you're trying to get information on behalf of someone else. It's such a black and white question, again, that I feel uncomfortable asking it. Or it's just like a weird question of a topic that is just like really uncomfortable, which again, I don't even think that's like ever happened. And really the only other time I've denied a request for a reading is if I deeply, strongly feel like I should not be giving this particular person a reading, which I think has only happened once ever. Or there's just something about the connection that just like feels right. Or I feel like I'm going to be furthering kind of like confusion, or they want something else, whatever. There's so many ways that it could be not a match, and it's really no fault of either person. Again, kind of going back to my previous sentiments. I also kind of want to talk about the foundation of receiving spiritual information, and it's a lot less physical and tangible and a lot more abstract, but in some ways I feel like it's almost like twice as important. Which I've said before, I believe everybody can benefit from intuitive information. However, I don't always feel like it's the right time, or if someone, makes the decision that they don't want it, then you just have to respect that. There has definitely been some times where I've read people in general, typically not clients, who, I think are trying their best and want to be very open, but energetically, I can just like very strongly feel that they're quite closed off. And I genuinely don't blame people who are skeptics or people who like still want this information, even though they're struggling to believe, to receive it, because you have every right to. And if this kind of helps your journey to be a little bit more open, then I think that's awesome. And I'm happy to kind of participate in that. But since the topic of this is how to have the best psychic reading, I don't necessarily think you're going to get the best psychic reading if you're not super open. Because since a reader is reading your energy or your higher self's energy, or really anything that's a web that is like kind of sourced from your energy, and you have such a severe block over it or on it that you don't, one, maybe you just don't want to know the truth because it could be very painful for you. It could contrast with your current ideologies. It could just like seriously mess up your life. And I don't necessarily blame people for that being the case. Knowing the truth and aligning to your intuition, or having a reader kind of allow you deeper and better access into your own intuition, can be really scary. It can contrast your current ideologies. It can trigger a lot of things within you. It could honestly have the potential for you to really mess up your life, because if you are living a life that is severely out of alignment with how you're living it now, that's like a really strong, heavy load of information. Because kind of think about that. Even if a person receives information, oh, they're not living their most authentic life, this is how they could be living their most authentic life, that information is likely to stick with them for a very long time, if not their entire lifetime, if they feel it's true, right? So they can reject it and they can repress it, but it will likely have long-lasting damaging effects if they are like proactively living a negative life or an out of alignment life, and they know what the answer is. And they're probably likely to kind of project that anger and insecurity onto other people. So it's almost like, providing that information can be really damaging. It can be really painful, and it can be really counterintuitive. And the likelihood is, energetically, the client has that very tightly kind of like secured in a box. So whether or not the reader is not able to access it, they don't want to access it, or kind of like any sort of combination and any other kind of like similar related thoughts and ideas, it's just not going to be like a productive reading overall, right? Like, you want to really remain open that there are any and all possibilities, that maybe this isn't the best it can get. Maybe this is actually the worst it can get for you, and you have a different perception value, or the exact opposite of that. Like, when you're open to any and all information, and you hypothetically like believe any and all information, that's the most powerful precursor for you to really change your life. When you kind of like deny and reject information, and you're like, this is the way it is, this is it, I'm not going to change, whatever. I don't know. Is there really a point, honestly, for receiving intuitive information? I'm not sure. I think kind of like parallel to this is just the fear of receiving intuitive information at the expense that like any one of these things can happen. The expense, again, it could kind of like mess up your life or whatnot. And yeah, there's just like a lot of reasons overall why you may feel really closed off, really afraid. So again, I don't necessarily blame people, but I think that people would find that being open-minded takes a lot less effort than remaining closed. Because if you think about this kind of like gate, it's just like a lot less effort to keep the gate open than to like keep it closed and kind of like reject anything and everything all the time. And I completely understand why people do it, because like, obviously, if you have a completely open gate, that means anything and everything can come in. And like, yeah, there's going to be a process of kind of like eliminating things out. But at this point, I'm just failing to understand how I cannot operate a camera. I really don't know. All right, well, I feel like I've talked about a lot of things. I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything else that I am missing. Also, no intuitive is perfect. No intuitive is going to get it 100% of the time. So if you're like, I really don't resonate with this, I really don't want to like take this person's advice, I don't want to take this into consideration, don't. If it resonates for you, then it resonates for you. I think that sometimes, it's good to admit if you have a little bit of, a blind side, or you're a little bit blocked. And hopefully there's a way that your reader can deliver that information to you, like a little bit more gently. But at the end of the day, it's really up to you. Never believe like anyone else wholeheartedly, especially when it comes to your own life. Like that's never a good thing. And yeah, I think with that said, also, as time kind of like resolves itself, as the universe changes, as you change, the information is likely to become a lot less relevant, you know? So don't necessarily take something into account that, you know, was advice from like a year ago, like, and apply it now because things can change and evolve quite quickly. I know that I've provided a lot of advice, and I guess it sounds like I may have a very, you know, singular and specific point of view, but I want to be clear that I don't judge anybody. It's a learning process for anyone and everyone who is receiving a reading. And I think it's up to the reader to kind of like hold people's hand and guide them and let them know what, you know, is appropriate and what type of advice they should expect to receive and what to do with the information. And everybody is just like so totally different. Like I have a completely different perception value than anybody else on this planet. And however you want to kind of like use your reading, so long as it's hopefully out of like a way of good and not, you know, a detriment to yourself and others, I'm honestly fine with it. And I would have to assume other people are as well. It's kind of interesting because like as I look back on this entire video, I'm just like, you know, I feel like these are like good tips for like life advice as well, right? Like be open-minded, try to mitigate fear, you know, be in a meditative kind of like spot and space, set your intention. So maybe this goes beyond intuitive readings. Anyway, good luck. Reach out to your readers if you have any questions or concerns. Happy reading.